It hasn't rained in months. The river that fed your village is now a stagnant ditch, buzzing with flies. The crops in the field, dead. The bread, gone. And the air, thick, choking, unmoving. You still got wool on your back and a scythe in your hands. Welcome to summer, medieval style. The Middle Ages wasn't always cold and gloomy. In fact, for a while, things were getting warmer. Between the 9th and 13th centuries, Europe experienced what historians call the medieval warm period. A stretch of relatively mild weather that let vineyards flourish in England and boosted food production across the continent. More food meant more people. More people meant more towns, trade, and construction. Things were looking up. But warmth is a fragile gift, and in the medieval world, everything depended on the sky. Now, picture this. It's the mid-13th century. The rains stop. Not for a day, not for a week, but for months. You watch your barley wither. Your well turns to mud. And you're not alone. This wasn't just one unlucky village. In 1240, Central Europe saw a brutal drought. In 1271, Italy recorded a heat so severe that entire rivers ran dry. France? Scorched. England? Wildfires. No joke, forests and entire wetlands caught fire in the summer sun. And what did people do? Well, they suffered. They prayed, and then they started dying. The devastating heatwave affected entire systems. Wells dry up, water gets drawn from shallower, filthier sources. Disease spreads. Fields crack open. Crops fail. Grain prices skyrocket. Livestock can't graze. Meat disappears. Malnutrition sets in. And then you get the knock-on effects. People flee to towns hoping for relief. But those towns are overcrowded, hot, and full of waste. More people means more competition for what little food is left. Tensions rise. Crime surges. Trust collapses. In some regions, starving peasants turned to foraging bark and eating acorns. And some resorted to more alternative sources of food. And in other regions, they simply starved. Now, you might think the church would offer relief, but for most people, it offered only an explanation. The sun was punishment. The drought was the divine wrath of God. The solution? Processions, prayers, and penance. Sometimes they helped, or often they didn't. Superstition thrived in the heat. Witches were blamed for droughts. Outsiders were driven off. And as desperation rose, so did the fires, literal and figurative. Entire villages burned when wildfires tore through dry thatch and forest. Sometimes, communities burned each other, metaphorically, looking for someone to blame. And here's where it all comes together. After decades of this unpredictable climate, 1315 hits, the start of the Great Famine. While that disaster began with relentless rain, it came on the back of decades of stress. Unstable yields, heat waves, drought-induced famines. The medieval system was already cracking. So, when the skies finally opened, they didn't bring life. They brought rot, mold, and misery. Fields drowned instead of drying. Europe went from boiling to drowning. And for millions of people, it meant one thing: death. So you might wonder, did anyone prepare? Sort of. Some monasteries were built near springs and forests, giving them more resilience. Some regions stockpiled grain in good years, but distribution was limited. Mostly, survival came down to three things: luck, location, and faith. And even then, the heat took its toll. This wasn't just a bad summer. It was a slow, smouldering collapse. So, the next time you complain about a heat wave, imagine living it in wool, without water, and no idea if it would ever end. No fans, no fridges, just fire and famine. Because For medieval Europe, when the rivers dried up, so did hope.